All right. Well, welcome again to Living Faith. I am pumped to keep going through our series through 1st and 2nd Peter. If this is your first time, first off, welcome. Excited to have you guys here. But just wanted to let you know we have a Living Faith Church app, so you can search Living Faith Indy in the App Store, and you can follow along with the stuff that we're going through here. And soon we will hopefully have an Android version of the app that's actually working. We're working on that. So, but if you have Android, I'm sorry, we have a screen for you. It's bigger than the iPhone people because it's up here. Welcome again. We are going through this series of 1st and 2nd Peter, and so far we have seen a lot of really great stuff out of this letter. And essentially what we're doing when we're reading this is we are reading the mail between Peter and this church in Asia Minor, or in modern-day Turkey. And so far he's told them to remember their salvation. He's explained to them what it looks like to live holy. He's shown them how they need to live different than the pagans and the people that live around them. And he's laid out what marriage should look like for believers. And today we're going into a section that's really fun, that's titled Suffering for Doing Good. So that's going to be a blast, right? But it's actually a really great section here. So, all right, we're going to jump into this really quick. Do me a favor, pull out your phone if you've got that app or if you've got the thing up here. We're going to read through 1 Peter 3, 8 through 12. He says, "Finally, all of you, be like-minded, be sympathetic, love one another, be compassionate and humble. Do not repay evil with evil or insult with insult. On the contrary, repay evil with blessing, because to this you were called so that you may inherit a blessing." Okay, so we're going to kind of land in this section here for a little bit. So just looking at that, that sounds kind of straightforward, right? Like more or less, it's like, do good things. Don't do bad things. When somebody does bad things, do good things. Yeah, that's essentially what this is. For us, this is a very straightforward list, but I want you to remember who we're talking here today, who we're talking to here. The people in Turkey did not have this as their baseline, okay? Our whole country, as messed up as it is and as many issues as there are in it, our country was built on the values of what we're reading here. So our whole culture is built to say compassion is what? Good or bad? Good. Yeah, and that's the most obvious thing in the world because it's compassion. It's good. But the people we're talking to here in Rome did not have that, if we look through all these things, he says be like-minded. So what's it mean to be like-minded? Somebody shout it out. Agreeable? Yeah. Kind of working together as a group, right? The Christians here are trying to be of a common accord and kind of work together towards what God's doing. It's holding people accountable. It's having a common goal. Now, do you guys think that the pagans living under Roman rule exemplified that? No, not at all. The whole idea of being like-minded would have been so foreign to them because even as Rome came in and conquered all these people, they would say, we are in charge, do what we say, but also do your own thing here as long as you don't make people mad. The Jews kind of did their own thing within Rome. It just wasn't a thing that they lived for. The next thing is be sympathetic. What's that mean? Yeah, that's one of those words you're I know what it means, but how do I define it?
Understanding
Understanding other people. It's feeling with people. It almost goes a step further than understanding it. It's stepping into the pain of or into the excitement of or whatever it is. That's sympathy. Do you think that the people in Turkey would have been sympathetic? Probably not. Everyone just kind of kept their head down and did what they were supposed to do. Rome was not known as caring about your feelings. That's not what they were. What about love one another? What's that look like? What's that mean? Yeah, to serve. Yeah, it's as simple as it sounds. It's it's loving other people. I just wanted to see what you guys would say. But it's Christians loving each other and looking out for each other just because they belong to Jesus. He's telling in your circle, in the church, make sure that you are loving each other really well. Not because of your interests or your natural friendships or your gender or because of your race or because of like where you're from or how tall you are. Like, it's not just like people you automatically get along with. It's love people because you're there together. And this is kind of the opposite of what they would have known in that culture. What about be compassionate? What's that mean?
Show concern for people, especially when they have less than
You read the app. Good job. All right. Yeah, it means to show concern for people, like especially when they have less than you. You know, it's actually caring for people and being compassionate for where they're at in their life. So one article I read about Rome said this. It says that Rome was known for a, quote, rigid moral code that despised weaknesses like compassion, which were seen as womanly. There's a couple things in that sentence, aren't there? Yeah, it keeps going farther downhill. But literally, like, Rome was literally known for thinking that compassion was a weakness that should be taken out of people. And Peter is writing to them and saying, be compassionate. Be people who exemplify these things. And another one of those things is humility. You know, it's having having a realistic view of who you are or a modest estimation of your own importance. And do you think that the pagans exemplified humility? No, not at all. Like, everything was about power. It was all about puffing up your chest and showing what you could do. And all of these things to us, we read them and we just read through them and we're like, yeah, like it's on like a greeting card, you know? Be sympathetic, be compassionate. It kind of feels like we just kind of run over it, right? This is not run over it stuff, though. Like, this is stuff that we take for granted in our culture. And as much as we have issues in our culture, these things have been pounded into us as good from the beginning, which is great. You know, it's awesome that we get this. And I think if we were to sit down or one day on the other side of heaven, whatever, when we sit down with these believers, they're going to be like, man, you had that really easy. And we're like, you had this other thing easy. And they're like, yeah, you're right. You know, like, there are so many things that we're just built in different. But then he takes it one step further and goes to something that is not naturally built into our culture. And he says, do not repay evil with evil or insult with insult. Repay evil with blessing. Now, even in our culture that is like based on Judeo-Christian values, like that's not normal. It might be exemplified. We might like it. But it's the kind of thing that you watch on a reel on Instagram and you're like, oh my gosh, like look how nice they are, you know? Because it pulls on our heartstrings. Like, we know it's good, but it's different. Like, it's totally outside of the norm of what we see. And we're actually shocked when we see people doing this. And Peter here doesn't just tell us to live these things out, he tells us why. And he quotes this verse in Psalm 34 here in 1 Peter 3, 10 through 12. It says, for whoever would love life and see good days must keep their tongue from evil and their lips from deceitful speech. They must turn from evil and do good. They must seek peace and pursue it. For the eyes of the Lord are on the righteous and his ears are attentive to their prayer. But the face of the Lord is against those who do evil. So why do we do these things? Is it because they're like really pretty and they look good on a card, or like it's like, oh, that's just what you're supposed to do, like world peace? No, it's because God exemplifies these things. Like, God is love. So how much should we be doing that? Like, a lot. You know, that should be a big part of who we are. And at the end of the day here, it says that God is looking for people who are righteous and he is against people who are evil. And that right there should be enough reason for us to actually live this stuff out, even if it doesn't naturally land. And he says he goes for people who are righteous. He loves people who are righteous. He lifts up people who are righteous. And who defines what is righteous? He does. Yeah, that's kind of the theme of this whole book. Like, we don't really get a say in what's righteous. We just either do it or don't. So I think my question for us in this, even if we kind of naturally get it, is what would it look like if we actually lived these things out for real? Not just because we were born to do it, you know, not just because our culture shifts us to being like saying that's a good thing. Like, what if we were actually so sympathetic that we didn't just look at somebody going through something horrendous in their lives and we say, oh, that's really sad. But like, what if we stepped next to them and we actually felt that pain with them and walked through it with them and showed up to their house to help walk them through it? Like, what if we actually lived out the sympathy that we see here? What if we really loved people so well that people outside of the church could not understand how this room got along so well? And to a certain extent, that's actually a thing that happens, you know? There's so many times that I've been in our church and I've looked around and been like, how are we friends? I love this, you know, because we're so different. And we have a great opportunity to work that out in November this year as we have a huge election. And we are one of the few churches I know of that are like almost split down the middle on like politically left-leaning, politically right-leaning. And there's good and there's hard to that. But we genuinely have an opportunity to love each other well through that. Like, what if people looked and they were like, how are they not fighting about this? Like, what if we really loved each other so well? What if we were so compassionate that the people that actually detest you couldn't help but still feel cared for by you? Because if you're a Christian, there's going to be people that detest you. We talked about that a couple weeks ago. You know, there's going to be people that just hate you. But what if they were like, I hate that person, but why are they so nice? You know? Like, what if we actually lived that out? Or what if we were so humble that people stopped thinking that churches were people that thought they had everything together, and they knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that we know how broken we are, you know? Because if you've been in church for long, you know that like in this room, we're here because we are terrible at things, not because we have everything together, right? But what if everyone outside saw that too? Like, what if we actually like live this thing out? And even more than that, like, what if when people did things to hurt us and people did evil towards us that we responded with good? Like, what if we genuinely did that? I want to tell you a story, and we'll watch a video really quick, of a time that I saw this play out in a way that was like so incredibly powerful, where somebody repaid good for evil. So in 2019, there was a police officer named Amber Geiger. Some of you guys might have heard some of this story, but she got home from work, a long shift as a police officer, which is tiring. And she got home, went to her apartment, and walked in her apartment. And when she walked in, she saw that there was a man in her apartment, and she got scared. And she got nervous and held up a gun and said, "What are you doing in my apartment?" And he said, "No, no, no," and started running towards her. So she shot him twice. And he fell and he died. The problem was she had actually gone up one too few flights of stairs and actually went in somebody else's apartment. She went to the same apartment, but on the floor below her, and the door was just open. So she walked in and thought, well, I must have left it unlocked. And then there was a guy there, and it's just this perfect mix of everything just horrible happening. And the guy that she killed was a guy named Botham Jean. Now, obviously, it was a freak accident. It's not like she went out of her way to kill this man, but she did murder him. Legally, she walked into his apartment and murdered him. But I just messed up is not a good enough explanation for the family, is it? That's not oh, it's okay, it happens. There's deep anger there. There's deep frustration there. I can't even imagine what that would be like. And she went to court and she was tried for murder. She pled not guilty, claiming it was an accident, but legally she was guilty for this, and she ended up getting sentenced to 10 years in prison. So Botham Jean's brother, Brant Jean, actually said after the incident when it happened, he contemplated getting a gun himself and going and murdering her and seeing if he could track her down to kill her so that her family would feel the same pain that they're feeling. And he went through all this stuff. But it didn't really end up that way. So I want to show you a video from the courtroom after they had said you get 10 years in prison. They often let the victims or the family of the victim speak to the person who just got sentenced. And this is what this is. This is the brother of the man that was shot speaking to the person who had killed his brother. So we're going to play this video really quick.
I can speak for myself. I forgive you. And I know if you go to God and ask Him, He will forgive you. And I don't think anyone could say it. Again, I'm speaking for myself, not even behalf of my family. But I love you just like anyone else. And I'm not gonna say I hope you rot and die just like my brother did, but I personally want the best for you. And I wasn't gonna ever say this in front of my family or anyone, but I don't even want you to go to jail. I want the best for you. Because I know that's exactly what both of them would want you to do. And the best would be give your life to Christ. I'm not gonna say anything else. I think giving your life to Christ would be the best thing that both of them would want you to do. Again, I love you as a person. And I don't wish anything bad on you. I don't know if this is possible, but can I give her a hug, please? Please?
Yes.
That's powerful, right? Like, I couldn't even imagine getting to that place and what he went through to get there. And you would never know that that kid contemplated killing her before that. But obviously, God got a hold of his heart and shut down the flesh and said, no, this is how we respond. And even at the end of that, man, he just hugging her. And I don't know if you could hear, but he's like sharing the gospel with her. Like, this is how you give your life to Jesus. This is what it looks like to find freedom from this. This is what I want for you. And man, that's powerful. Like what if we actually lived that out? Like you can tangibly feel the righteousness of God in that room.
Yeah.
And the really cool thing too is afterwards the judge went afterwards and talked to her and said, hey, at church this last Sunday, my pastor talked about Jesus leaving the 99 to get the one, and prayed for her and gave her a Bible and hugged her, and like after sentencing her to 10 years. Like that's what it looks like when Christ moves so powerfully in us that we can then live that out to the world around us. It's not just lighthearted, be sympathetic, be like-minded. Like this is what it looks like to show the heart of God to the people around us, to be like-minded, to be sympathetic, to love one another, to be compassionate, to be humble in everything that we do. And I think often we really suck at this stuff. And I kind of alluded to this earlier, but 4 years ago, during COVID and during this big election, a lot of us in this room threw this stuff out of the window in the name of fighting for what's right. When we're passionate about something, we a lot of times throw these things out of the window in the name of what we believe in and what we need to stand up for. And like, I'm not saying don't fight for what's right. We obviously need to do that. We just talked about that like 2 weeks ago in this exact same book. But that doesn't ever come at the expense of being like-minded, sympathetic, loving, compassionate, and humble. And standing for our convictions does not ever come at the expense of being like-minded, sympathetic, loving, compassionate, and humble. And being an outspoken Christian doesn't ever come at the expense of being like-minded, sympathetic, loving, compassionate, and humble. And even when somebody murders your family and you have to face them, because it sucked just having to get up on that stand and have to talk to her. But it didn't come at the expense of being like-minded, sympathetic, loving, compassionate, and humble. And Peter takes this mindset and he doubles down on it in the next verse, verse 13. So 1 Peter 3:13, he says, "Who is going to harm you if you're eager to do good? But even if you should suffer for what is right, you're blessed. Do not fear their threats. Do not be frightened." And I love the simplicity of that statement. Like, who's going to harm you if you do good? You know, if you do something that's good, who's going to be mad at you? Like, it's just kind of like jokingly at this point. Like, if you're good, who's going to be like, how dare you be good? But even if they are, isn't it better to be righteous? You know, like, you'll be blessed. And I think when you go into this section, the title of suffering for doing good, which, by the way, is added way after this was written. That's a modern day thing, the titles. But when you hear suffering for doing good, you're like, oh, this is going to be rough. But really, he's just like, who cares if you suffer for doing good? Focus on what you did that was good. You know, live this stuff out. And I don't know if anyone here has ever had this situation where somebody did evil to you and you repaid good towards them. But it's almost like in a maybe sinful way, I don't know, kind of fun. Like, you know what I mean? Like what I mean by that is like when somebody's really terrible to you and you're overly nice to them, it just disarms them, you know? And the person's like, well, be mad at me, you know? And you're like, no, I'm good. Bless you, you know? Like I think that's kind of what Peter's looking at here. He's saying, like, even if they're mad at you and they come down on you for doing something good, then fantastic. What's it really mean to suffer for doing good because you did good? You know, and if we lived that, if we exemplified that, like, what would it look like? A couple years ago, one of our kids was being bullied pretty badly at school. And as a father, I just wanted to pummel that kid. You know, like, to be really honest, in that moment when I heard my kids say what they had gone through, I was not above punching a child. I spent time with God and I got over that. I didn't do it. I did not live that. I know. But it was a lot to hear, you know, to know that evil's being done to you, I think, is different than knowing that evil's been done to your family, like we just saw. And we encouraged our kid to treat that person with kindness, and we even bought him a present, I think for his birthday, I can't remember, but we got something for this kid that had been mean to our kid, and that other kid was absolutely floored. Like, he just didn't know what to do about it. After that, he was still a jerk, and he didn't really change. Like, nothing really got better, but the power that he had over my kid shifted. It was interesting, because he knew there wasn't going to be retaliation. So he's like, what am I even doing this for? And something in it kind of shifted, and we came to find out in that this boy was adopted out of foster care, which is something that's obviously close to our hearts, as our kids were adopted out of foster care. And the stuff that he went through was pretty rough. And I think about what my kids would be like if they were in a rough situation still, if they didn't have parents and family and church that loved them. And that kid that was adopted out of foster care has two moms that adopted him, so he has no father figure in his life. There was no man in his life to invest in him. And that next year, about a year later, I chaperoned a field trip for my kid, and they put that kid in our group specifically because he was such a pain that the teacher was like, I need a strong male figure who can control him or it'll get out of control. So he was in my group, and within like 20 minutes, I had to discipline him because I don't even remember what we did, but I remember thinking, you've got to be kidding me. And we took care of it, and he sat down, and then after that, I continued to show him grace and love. And from that point forward, like at least with me, it totally shifted in that time, just because somebody had shown him love where he had shown evil. And I think there are a lot of people like that in our lives where when we bless them for the things that they throw at us, like it just kind of disarms people, and it shows them the love of Christ in a way that they wouldn't have seen otherwise. And in this next section, he kind of hits a little bit more in on that. And Peter here goes into this verse that you've probably heard a bunch of times, that's always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you for the reason for the hope that you have. And we use that verse all the time as like a share your testimony verse. It's like you got to be prepared. You got to have it ready. But there's a lot more to this. There's a lot more depth in this. So I want you guys to listen to the context here. We're going to read, continue here in verse 15. It says, "But in your hearts revere Christ as Lord. Always be prepared to give an answer to everyone who asks you to give the reason for the hope that you have. But do this with gentleness and respect, keeping a clear conscience so that those who speak maliciously against your good behavior in Christ may be ashamed of their slander. For it's better, if it's God's will, to suffer for doing good than for doing evil." So he's saying, like, yes, be prepared to give a reason for the hope that you have, but do it with gentleness and respect. Don't beat it over their heads. Like, don't be like, this is why I have hope. Like this is why I have hope in my life. This is what Christ has done in me, and do it with gentleness and respect. And man, do some Christians miss this one. Like we take that one verse and put it on a bumper sticker and be like, this is what God did in my life, and we just stop there. But how are we doing this with gentleness and respect to love people and walk people through the process of hearing about God? And I think in every circumstance we need to do that. So if you guys know me well, there's kind of this like ongoing joke that I'm really good at dealing with customer service people and getting what I want. Yeah, a couple of you guys are snickering because you've like been a part of that. It doesn't always work that way. See the video from Brazil last year on our mission trip. But most of the time, I'm just kind of like able to get stuff figured out. And I'll tell you, like, when we were in San Diego this last week on a mission trip to Mexico, we had to rent a car in San Diego and leave it at the airport. It was a big thing. But I got a rental car, and is Greg in here? No, Greg's with the kids. So Greg and I walked up to the rental counter, and I was just like really nice to them, and they're like, hey, do you want a free upgrade to a BMW? And I was like, yeah, sure, that sounds great. So they gave me like a really nice SUV. It was really cool. It was like a 3 Series or something. I don't know what the like lower one is. And then I was like, hey, that's really awesome. Thank you so much. And I walked to the next counter, like where you actually pick up the car. And he was like, oh, that one's not available. I was like, oh, it's okay. It was a free upgrade anyway. Just give me whatever you have. And I was just really nice to the guy. And he was like, you know what? Let me just bump you up to like the top tier. Let me give you the 7 class or whatever. And I was like, hey, that sounds awesome. Thanks so much. So we were driving like a $90,000 car on a mission trip. It was weird. But it was literally 100% just because I was like gentle and kind with the person. That was it. Like I was like, hey, if you want to give me an upgrade, great. Like, but that was it. Like I wasn't like demanding, hey, give me this thing, because that just doesn't work. Or is Brian in here? Yeah, Brian. So this week, Brian and I went to a camera store, and I had bought something a few weeks ago that I found out was on sale, and I didn't get the sale price. And I was like, hey, it'd be really cool if I could get the sale price. They're like, yeah, sure. And they like refunded me the money that would have been for the sale price. I didn't demand anything. I was like, hey, this would be really great. And they did it. And like I was like, cool. And I walked away and called Autumn and was like, I got this money refunded. She was like, what? And 100%, like I'm like a customer service whisperer. And the only reason for it is because of gentleness and respect. Like literally, it has nothing to do with my ability. It has nothing to do with like my character at all. Like I'm literally just telling you like this stuff works, you know? Like when you live this stuff out. And I genuinely care about people. Like, I try and keep my cool whenever things go bad. I try to treat people well all the time. But like, it's because of Christ in me. It's not because like I'm great. And when we live this stuff out, like it really does matter. One thing I love about our church is that all of us have saved friends and we have lost friends. Like we don't just like separate ourselves from the world. Like we try to bring Jesus into the world. And I think that's a powerful thing. And one thing I've noticed is that like we've got a few pastors on staff here, and every time a pastor hangs out with like a lost friend of somebody in our church, like that lost friend always comes like super defensive. Have you guys noticed that? Like if I'm ever hanging out with like one of your lost friends and like we're all together, they're like, oh, you're the pastor, and I'm so sorry I said the F word or whatever, it doesn't matter. And we just are like normal people, and within 15 minutes, it always happens, that person is always like, wait, you're the pastor? You know, like, yeah, like that can't be right. Like you're just like a person. And we're like, yeah, we're just like normal people. And all of a sudden, like all of these things that like they had built up against the church and against people in authority and all this stuff just kind of like come down, like the walls just kind of drop. And that is 100% because the leaders in our church are gentle and respectful, you know, because we're compassionate, because we live these things out. Yeah, it's just humble. Like, and it's not because like we've worked so hard on being humble. It's because we realize how like dumb and broken we are compared to Jesus. That's what brings humility. It's not like thinking highly of yourself but not saying it out loud. Like it's genuinely realizing how broken we are next to Jesus, and then we're just like people at that point. And I think you can say that about like every leader in our church. If you just live this stuff out, like it works. And that sounds so dumb for me to say, like, because like these are like deep, intricate, like biblical, scholarly things. But like really, if you just live this stuff out and you're a nice person, people want to hear the gospel. Like no one wants to be beaten over the head with reality. They want to be offered reality in a loving way. And that doesn't mean that we like cover up the truth. That doesn't mean that we hide from it. That doesn't mean that we even for a second like step back from what God says truth is. We talked about that just a couple weeks ago. Remember, this is all one thing. We're just separating it out as we talk. But when we do it with gentleness and respect, it just like works. And the reason we do it this way, the reason that all of this stuff that Peter said is how we live it, is because Christ modeled it for us. And this is what he goes into in verse 18. He said, "For Christ also suffered once for sins, the righteous for the unrighteous." You want to talk about repaying good for evil? Jesus. To bring you to God. He was put to death in the body, but made alive in the spirit. And after being made alive, he went and made proclamation to the imprisoned spirits, to those who were disobedient long ago, when God waited patiently in the days of Noah while the ark was being built. In it, only a few people, 8 in all, were saved through water. And the water symbolizes baptism that now saves you also, not the removal of dirt from the body, but the pledge of a clear conscience towards God. It saves you by the resurrection of Jesus Christ, who has gone into heaven and is at God's right hand, with angels, authorities, and powers in submission to him. So all of this stuff is because Jesus so perfectly modeled it for us, that in his perfection, he died for us. That in our brokenness and in our anger towards him and in us just throwing evil at him constantly, he still gave us good. And that's why all this stuff is so important, because we don't just respond with sympathy, love, compassion, humility, goodness, gentleness, and respect because we want a free rental car upgrade. If we're doing that, that is such a small reason to live, and it's just manipulation. But if we actually are those people, because Jesus has made us those people, it reflects the gospel. And honestly, I hadn't even thought about this until right now, but I shared the gospel with the person at the rental car company. He asked why we were doing it. I was like, oh, we're going to Mexico, and here's why, and told him about Jesus. And the people at the camera store all know we're Christians because we hang out there a lot. That's an issue on itself. But like, they know that we respond that way because we love Jesus. We don't respond that way to try and get something. We don't respond that way to manipulate them. We do it because of Jesus. And like, genuinely, what if we all did this? Like, what if we all really lived this? And this is what Peter's saying here. Like, you are Christians in a pagan world, in this Roman Empire that hates you, in this area of Turkey that doesn't have any, like, understanding of why you would be the way you are. So what if you lived this stuff out? What if when people did evil to you, you showed them kindness and respect? What if they did all this stuff? Because then those people would look at you and be like, why the heck is that person so nice to me? It's because of Jesus, right? Or what if they look at you and say, like, why would you help me with this? How many of you heard that before? Why would you come to my house and serve me in this way? It's because of Jesus. You know, why are you not cussing me out for my mistake? Why are you so patient with me? Because of Jesus. Why are you so loving even though you disagree with my lifestyle? I love hearing that one. You think I'm living in sin. Why do you still love me so well? Jesus. That's the only reason. Or why are you still hanging out with me if we disagree politically? Jesus. You know, why would you help me when I hurt you? Because of Jesus. And I think like this stuff that looks simple when we first read it is really not because of the depth of it. But when we live it, it kind of becomes simple again. Yeah. You know, just do it because of Jesus. Like just be kind and be compassionate. And when you want to lash out, take a breath, go back to Jesus and realize what you have been forgiven of. Because people that were forgiven of much, forgive much. So that's my plea for you guys, is just like live this stuff out. And if any of these things you have trouble living out, then work on living it out. Really simple. So when you guys came in, you had a connection card, that like big card thing. If you can pull that up, tear off the bottom, or you can do it on the app. You can search that. The connection card this week is so incredibly simple. But again, please don't read past it because it's so incredibly simple. There's only one thing on it. It's I need to work on these things. And you can circle the ones that you need to work on. Or on the app, you can just type in the ones that you need to work on. So do you need to work on being like-minded? Do you come into this place trying to push your own thing or trying to say, I don't want to turn out like the rest of them? You know, I don't want to look like these people. If that's you, maybe you need to circle that and work on being like-minded. Maybe you're just not a sympathetic person. And there's a lot of people who are just not sympathetic people. A lot of people that really genuinely struggle with emotion. And that's okay if you're wired that way, but it's not okay to not be sympathetic. It just means there's more work involved on that. Maybe you need to work on being loving. You know, maybe you love people when they do good to you, or you love people that love you back because you've been hurt in the past and there's a wall up there. Maybe you need to work on being compassionate and not just walking past people that are in brokenness and being like, well, they probably did it to themselves. Maybe we need to work on that. Maybe it's being humble. And like I said, not just not saying how good you are, but genuinely understanding how broken you are is what humility is. Repaying good for evil. Maybe that's you. Maybe you're the type that's like, when I've been wronged, then I'm done and it's over. Like, what if we repaid good for that evil? Maybe it's responding with gentleness. Maybe you just aren't the kind of person that, responds gently, you know. Maybe you're the kind of person that likes to lash back. Like, let's work on being people who respond with gentleness, even if you have to grit your teeth through it the first few times. And then responding with respect. You know, a lot of times out of insecurity, we belittle people who are hurtful towards us to try and gain ground, but all that does is destroy us. Like, what would it do if we responded with respect? So that's my plea for you guys today, is look at that list and say, what of this am I not exemplifying? And trust me, I have plenty on this list that I don't exemplify on a day-to-day that I want to. And how do we look more like Jesus because he died for us? And in our brokenness and in our lack of respect and in our lack of compassion, he showed us compassion. He showed us humility. And he so repaid our evil with good. So God, that's our cry today. Yeah. Lord, I pray for those things that we would just live them out. And even on a Sunday where most of us are just tired, and it's been a lot recently, and we just need to breathe. Lord, I pray that we would breathe in these things. Breathe in compassion and humility and your goodness. Lord, I pray that you'd fill us back up with these good things, so many of which are fruits of the Spirit anyway. Lord, would you teach us to live these things out, even as the world comes against us and calls us names or hurts us or lashes out or whatever. Lord, I pray that we would respond in a way that is so shockingly good to them that they just don't know how to handle it. And that the people who are, essentially even as adults, bullying us, that we would be able to show Jesus to them in such a powerful way that they can't help but see that you're moving. And God, even if we go through an incredible tragedy and have somebody take a life of a person in our family or hurt us in such a deep-seated way that we just want to murder them, Lord, I pray that we would stand on the truth that you, God, change that in us, and that you enable us to show love and to show compassion where we just want to show anger and malice. God, help us to live these things out. Help us to be like the people that Peter is speaking to here in Turkey. That we wouldn't look at the world around us that's broken and hurting and say, woe is me. But that we would stand up for that world and ask for compassion on those people. God, I pray that we would so genuinely love the lost people and the broken people around us that we don't see them as the enemy. We continue to see them as people who are being lied to by the enemy. Yeah. Lord, I pray that this place would be seen as a beacon of hope to the community, not as opposition to the community. And that we as friends of people that don't know you would be seen as beacons of hope and compassion and humility and love and like-mindedness so that they see Jesus in us. So Lord, I just pray that blessing over all of us here today, that we would live that and people would see that. Amen.